This week on The Other Side,
we believe in free speech. And for a politician to make a statement saying that they're just, whatever it was, maybe Tony Burke's quote got butchered in the media, I've been lied about, so I don't want to say he definitively said it this way, but for him to say that he was going to personally look through the visa and put a stop to it on the basis of something that I never said, no politician would proudly say that in America. That would be instantly, people would go, you're an authoritarian. And so when we hear that, we do wonder, like, is that a free country? Like, because I could go to the Middle East and not say that. I could go to Dubai and not hear that, that we're going to review this on the basis of something that she said. And so you go, how could this happen in Australia? Like, I've never been there, but I always assumed the Aussies were like the Americans, like, like that's our brethren. And surely they're going to be equally as mortified that they would have a politician say that. And so we just wonder what's going on, especially after we were following all of the stories of what happened in Australia during COVID. We were just wondering, like, has Australia been taken over by communism? Like, do we need to go rescue Australians? I said that once, tongue in cheek.
Yeah, I remember that. I think, and Matt Walsh made some
very seriously. Like, Candace is calling for us to invade Australia, but I was making the obvious statement that, like, if we're going to talk about spreading democracy, maybe we should go help our friends over in Australia first. Because I don't think they've got it.
Hopefully, we'll work it out. Rock star American conservative commentator Candace Owens joins me direct from the US to answer her critics and explain why she is insisting she will not cancel her Australian tour without a fight, despite the government saying that they will keep her out of the country because they don't like her views. Labor and the Greens demonstrate loud and clear this week that they're in no shape to be managing Australia's economy. We'll look at three very scary things that happened this week on the left side of politics. This is The Other Side. I'm Damien Cook. Conservatives, classical liberals and libertarians who watch a lot of content online, you'll be very familiar with our very special guest this week. Candace Owens is an American conservative political commentator, author and media personality. And if you don't know her, she was the communications director for a conservative university-focused activist group called Turning Point USA from 2017 to 2019. And in 2018, she co-founded the Blexit movement, seeking to get African Americans out of the Democratic Party and aligned with more conservative viewpoints. She's a strong critic of the Black Lives Matter movement. She hosted a show on the conservative education channel PragerU for a while, and then in 2021, she joined the big US media platform, The Daily Wire. She left The Daily Wire this March after a falling out with the founders, Ben Shapiro and others, because of the very different positions they had on the Israel-Palestine war. In the months since, she's been accused of anti-Semitism. We'll get to that in a moment with Candace herself. But she's due to tour Down Under in November. And just this past week, our immigration minister, Tony Burke, Albo's man in charge of visas, got a little political, saying publicly that he would personally review her application and that he hoped the tickets to her event were refundable. Okay, so we can have 3,000 Gazan refugees, and I reckon it'd be pretty safe to say that some of them at least would be a little anti-Semitic. These poor people have been living under a terrorist regime that actually openly says it wants Israel wiped off the map, remember? So that's okay, according to Albo's immigration minister. But Mr. Burke says an American Christian conservative mum of three who has been accused of making comments that are anti-Semitic on her talk show, but she denies, she's not allowed to come into our country. She is a threat to our national security. Now, I do not support any comments that are truly anti-Semitic. I've been criticised on this show for being too pro-Israel, and I am very pro-Israel in many ways. And no, it's not because anyone is forcing me to be. Thank you. I'm independent and I can make up my own mind about things, and I always will. I vehemently disagree with a lot of what Candace has been saying lately, the way that it's being presented, if in fact it is being presented accurately, which I doubt. And I do think a lot of it is way off the reservation in some parts. But Candace has been an absolute trooper for conservative values and values in general in the public spotlight. She has been copping all the slings and arrows for our side of politics for almost a decade. So we're just going to abandon her and kick her to the gutter now that she's apparently, allegedly saying these things? Do we not try to, talk to her and understand where she's coming from a little bit better? Do we disregard everything she says now as rubbish and everything that she's ever said? I personally think the conservative media have been a little too harsh on her this week. The left-wing media, of course, are being understandably and typically idiotic, naive, and authoritarian about the whole free speech thing. They want all speech banned that isn't left-wing or doesn't agree with them. That's to keep all of us deplorable little people and working class people in line and keep their little inner city bubbles of self-delusion protected from anything mean and nasty like reality. When will people ever understand the importance of free speech and that free speech means letting people say things you don't agree with? And that includes mean, bad, hurtful, nasty, and wrong things a lot of the time. Now, there are some limits, and really, really bad speech should be argued against and pushed back on very hard by good speech. Get it all out in the open and let the light of truth shine and let the people be the judge. That's how a free society operates. We shine the light on the BS tropes of the anti-Semites and their tropes stop having any effect. That's how it works. That's much better than suppressing the tropes or trying to shut down these things, because then they just get bigger and they hang around for 100 years like many of them have done. So the strategy's not working of pushing back too hard and trying to shut down anything deemed to be anti-Semitic. There will always be idiots out there. There will always be horrible, racist, crazy neo-Nazis. And the best thing you can do is be aware who they are, first of all, and what they think. But I like to think of my fellow Aussies as intelligent and discerning. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope not. Maybe we need thought police to protect us from bad things people might say. I just know that the minute that you let bureaucrats and pollies police free speech, you're going to get things like the E-Safety Commission, and sometimes worse. The authoritarian, passive-aggressive little psychopathic bureaucrats coming and politicians starting to get excited that they can police your thoughts and all your self-expression. And politicians wanting to curb free speech to suit themselves and their own political agendas. So no matter what your politics is, we should all be in agreement that we must allow free speech. If we make laws to stop it, they will be used against our own side one day, no matter which side you're on. Anyway, no need to worry, because we have the great, mighty protectors of freedom, the Australian Liberal Party and their National Party coalition friends, to save us from the tyranny of Albo and Tony Burke and the control left. Ah, yes, the Liberals and Nats. They will stand up to the tyrants who want to block different points of view, and they'll defend our free nation just like the Anzacs did. Sorry, what was that? Oh, okay. I'm sorry to report, folks, that the Liberals have in fact backed the calls for Candace Owens to be banned from entering Australia. Peter Dutton's immigration spokesman, Dan Tehan, wants Minister Burke to block Ms Owens' visa application on character grounds because she's spreading, quote, hateful messages. And he He will be the judge of that, not you as a grown-up Australian adult. Oh, and we have a clip of Liberal MP Julian Leeser appearing on Sky News' Erin Molan's show this week. Let's roll that.
Well, Candace Owens is one of those controversial public speakers who takes a stand on a range of issues, including anti-Semitic stands, including anti-Muslim, including anti-LGBTI stands. I think we've got enough hate and social division in this country at the moment. You know, when we were in government, we banned people like Milo Yiannopoulos, we banned David Icke, the Holocaust denier. Previous Liberal governments have banned David Irving coming to Australia. This is no different.
What would you say to people who say freedom of speech, freedom of speech?
Well, there's a difference between liberty and licence. You don't have the freedom to shout fire in a crowded theatre and cause a riot. Australia is a country that protects and believes in freedom of speech, but that has to be balanced against the right of ordinary citizens to go about their business free of harassment.
Well, I feel so much safer knowing that the Labor Party and the Liberal Party are protecting me from stuff that might hurt my little brain. What could possibly go wrong with politicians and bureaucrats being the gatekeepers of what we can see, hear and read? I am very troubled by the glee in that Liberal MP's face when he talks about who they banned when they were in government. We really are getting a reputation for being an anti-free speech nation, intolerant of different viewpoints. And that worries me, because I like to think of tolerance and free speech as a couple of the national strong points of this great country. So again, we have no real opposition coming from the opposition. And that's a problem, because the Westminster system requires an opposition to be an opposition, not nod in agreement with the government all the time. If they do that, you end up with people feeling like the country is run by a detached elitist class or a uni party. And people start to feel that they have no representation in Parliament and no way to get their political voice heard. Then they lose faith in the parliamentary system, and that is very bad, because the parliamentary system is designed to prevent riots, violence and wars by having a place for people to go and argue and disagree peacefully. Now, where in the world have people lost faith in their major political parties and the parliamentary system, and it's led to disenfranchised people feeling hopeless and unheard and hitting the streets and rioting lately? Can you think of anywhere? Candace Owens will join me in just a sec. Stay right there. Private internet access is terrific. With all the big government clampdown on online speech lately, you are taking a big risk if you don't have a VPN. That's a virtual private network. And it blocks spying eyes in big government or big corporate from seeing your IP address and hacking into your data. Now, it's super easy and cheap to set it up. It's not technical. Even I could do it. And even if you already have a VPN, you should consider switching to these guys, because since I have had zero reduction in my internet speeds, which was a bit of a problem with the one I was using before. And I don't even have to think about this one. It's just on automatically whenever I turn on my computer. And even better news is that the other side has secured a special deal for you, which will get you set up for 83% off the usual price and with 4 months free. And get this, that brings the price down to less than $3 a month. It is absolutely amazing. So jump on it now, sign up to our special deal and help support us by supporting our sponsors. piavpn.com/otherside. piavpn.com/otherside. Now, as you know, we've been pretty pro-Israel on this show, and I have to be honest, pretty pro-Israel. I have fairly strong views about Israel's right to exist and my concerns about terrorism in the Middle East. And so, that's how we've been on this show up until now. As I said, we're completely independent. No one's pulling any strings here. And I deplore real anti-Semitism because it's identity politics of the absolute worst kind. And we're all about zero identity politics on this show. But I don't feel so threatened by Candace Owens, a Christian, African-American, mother of three podcaster, that I feel that, she's a threat to Australia. She needs to be banned from our shores by meddling politicians. Candace Owens is bloody smart, and she's spoken much sense in the past and still does. So much that I think we should at least let her come down here for a visit and a tour, and maybe even be grateful that she would even want to. Candace, she joins me right now. Welcome to the other side. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are not afraid of different opinions on this show, different views. We like to debate stuff, and I want to apologise for our politicians and bureaucrat class at the moment, and also probably our mainstream media. Somewhere around 2020, they got the idea that it was okay to run roughshod over our civil liberties and freedoms, and Australia's in a bit of a weird state at the moment, I think. I do want to address those claims of anti-Semitism that are swirling around at the moment later, but a lot of people out there don't perhaps know you, or haven't followed you, or been fans of yours for as long as you've been around. I mean, it all started for you around about 2017, right? You hit the big time, I guess, in a sense. Tell us a little bit about, you were a strong voice against the manipulation of the African American community by the left and the Democrats.
Sure. So I sort of fell into politics quite accidentally. I was not politically inclined whatsoever, but with Donald Trump running for office, I think every person in the entire world was suddenly paying attention to American politics. And the funny backstory is I was not keen on him. I just was sort of like, nah, he should not be president of the United States because this guy is on TV and he says you're fired. And I thought of him more as a character and didn't think that that would be the right person to assume office. But I was quite surprised when suddenly the media began a campaign trying to convince me that he was Hitler and that he was a racist and that his goal was to put Black Americans back into chains. I mean, I just thought it was ridiculous, to the point of being offensively stupid. And so I really just started going, okay, I didn't want him to be president, but also why are all of these media stations that I've trusted my entire life going so far as to try to trick me into hating this guy? Obviously, he couldn't have been all these things plus been on the mainstream media themselves. I mean, he had his own show for over 2 decades. And so I decided to listen to like one Donald Trump speech, and I heard what he had to say. And his pitch was a very quick elevator pitch to Black Americans, like, hey, things aren't great for you guys right now. Why don't you just try something different? And I was like, fair enough. It wasn't a hard sell for me, but I was really shocked to see them completely lie about what he said. So that was the first fracture for me in terms of my trust in the mainstream media. And I just started listening to more of what he was saying. And at the same time, we had BLM, the movement, was really getting onto the rise. And I just decided to be a voice against that and make a video just on my YouTube. Like literally, I just started uploading videos just mocking the absurd drama of how the media was covering Donald Trump. And I was very blessed. And just a couple of videos in, by my 3rd video, it was trending worldwide in Brazil and in France. And the rest really was pretty much a rocket ship. You get the call from Fox News, and it's been go, go, go ever since. But I guess the big thing was just me standing up to the Black Lives Matter narrative, like this kind of idea that you can be a cosmic victim and perpetually be a victim because of the color of your skin, and nobody can ask you any questions or critique you. I found it to be unbelievably patronizing and insulting, and I still do.
Yeah, and I think that was really the turning point for me, I guess, and a bit of an awakening for me as to the manipulation of the media, first of all, but also just the manipulations that were going on with the left generally. And in particular, I was starting to watch Donald Trump's impeachment trials and things like that. And I started to, I had a bit of time on my hands at that period. And I realized, God, this is really an attack. This is not normal. And the way things were being covered, and I mean, that's when I started to become very sympathetic to him and start to look at him in a different light. Mm-hmm. And I think more and more and more people have sort of woken up over the years. Tell me about where you think things are at in America right now in regard to the election. Kamala Harris is about to do an interview as we're recording this. It's before when people are watching this, she'll have already done it. But just give me your take at the moment on the situation, because we're hearing down here that it's very much Kamala now. It's the energy is really in her direction.
Yeah, that's definitely not true. I mean, the media energy is in her direction. The media energy has always been against Trump, so that's nothing new. I mean, the media energy has always favored the Democrat horse, and they've hated Trump really since he announced that he was running. And, someone explained to me why that is. And what they said, which is very true, is that the establishment always fears whichever candidate can galvanize the populist right. And that's because they truly fear the populist right. The populist right are the sorts of people who believe in America, believe in our Second Amendment, believe in our families, will defend our families, will defend our rights. And so somebody pointed out to me, there's always been this trend of a full media attack when somebody unexpectedly galvanizes the populist right, and that's Trump. And so, they are obviously essentially just saying she's ennobled immediately just because she's not Trump. And celebrities are, of course, getting right into line, as Hollywood does. You can pick any narrative, whether it's COVID and that becomes their new queen for a minute, or if it's Kamala Harris. So it's the same stuff all the time. But I will say that right now, Americans, we're in a really fragile state. And I think it happened slowly and then very quickly. It began with Trump just calling out fake news, and all of us just kind of having this realization that, wait a second, we are being lied to by a mass scale. And obviously that was catalyzed by COVID and the lies that were told. And then we watched Trump, who we know they will do anything to stop getting into office, survive an assassination attempt. And we still haven't gotten answers about what actually happened that day. They're just kind of trying to memory hole it. And so we've lost faith in our institutions. We've lost faith in fair elections, and we've lost faith in the media. It's a
But definitely lost faith in the media. When you think about the fact that assassination attempt wasn't very long ago, and it's kind of faded into the distant memory already of the news cycle, it's quite extraordinary, right? And it really, the abdication, if you like, or assassination of the career of Joe Biden, that kind of turned the news cycle around, and we've just forgotten about the fact that the other candidate, the former president, we've not for a couple of millimeters would have been assassinated, and that would have been an extraordinarily frightening thing, right? In terms of what might have happened if that had happened.
That's exactly right. And like I said, it doesn't help that we haven't gotten any answers. People that were there that day were effectively saying that this was allowed to happen, that they were signaling. I'm sure you saw that interview that's made its way around the world, that they were signaling to the police, hey, there's a guy up there with a gun. And they're pitching this as just, it was just sort of a remarkable intelligence failure. And people aren't sure. And that's a very scary place to be in as a nation, when you don't even have enough faith in your institutions to trust that they were not involved. Like, that really shows you the nature of the relationship right now between the American people and their government.
Well, this is the problem, right? I mean, we hear constantly that, everybody's worried about misinformation and disinformation and the decay of trust in institutions. And, this is destroying our trust in our institutions. And the institutions. The trust in the institutions is going because people aren't getting the right information out of those institutions. And, whether it's this is why conspiracy theories evolve and develop, because there's no facts to fill the void. If there's no facts to fill the void, you get conspiracy theories. People will make stuff up. And if they're not rebutting those conspiracy theories, then it becomes, well, what's really going on here? And so the trust starts to disappear.
That's exactly right. And they've just become authoritarian about the facts. And we obviously saw this during COVID with fact checkers. And I mean, you were arriving suddenly into a situation where people could go get the vaccine, upload a video of themselves and be like, hey, I got the vaccine and here's what it's done to my arm. And they would be taken down. Their accounts would be banned because they were spreading dangerous misinformation, where people testify, basically telling their own stories was being presented as dangerous misinformation. And what's happened too often, especially over the last 5 years, is that the conspiracy theorists keep being proven correct, right? So if you're going to keep calling them conspiracy theorists, you need to be able to reflect back and say, well, we told you that was a conspiracy theorist, and you listened to them, and look how your life is now. Like, if you had not listened to that conspiracy theorist, your life would be better off. Instead, it's the exact opposite, where they're basically going around calling everybody conspiracy theorists. And now we say, what's the difference between a conspiracy theory and the truth? Give it 2 weeks, So
and
give it 2 weeks.
Yeah. And that in itself is a problem, right? Because, there are some crazy conspiracy theories out there. And,
without question.
And then we can't tell the truth from fiction, and that's kind of, also in itself, there's a bit of a conspiracy theory about that being a thing that they actually want. They want us all totally unable to tell what's true and what's not anymore, because that makes people easier to manipulate. And I think it is realistic to say that we do have bad actors in the world, bad state actors in the world, who are aggravating this in the Western world. There's no question about it. And they're amplifying that as well. Candace, we just need to take a little bit of a break. We'll just have a quick sponsorship break, and we'll be back with Candace Owens on the other side in just a moment. Did you know that for roughly every 2 nurses in Australia working hard to save lives and take care of the sick on the front line, there's 1 taxpayer-funded bureaucrat sitting behind a desk doing admin and making and enforcing rules and regulations? That's right, nearly 1 bureaucrat for every 2 frontline nurses. In most countries, it's 1 bureaucrat for 10 frontline nurses. That's how bloated our public services become. But you'll never hear about it from the regular nurses' unions, because they also represent many of those public servants. So says the leading alternative nurses union in Australia, the NPAA. If you're a nurse, it's time to change to a union that will not only look after you without using your money to support the Labor Party, but which is taking on the government health systems to sidestep the bureaucrats and use the savings to pay all nurses 25% more. That's what they want to do. The current waste has got to stop. All the red tape doesn't just suck up resources and time, it actually means that the nurses left on the front line have got to jump through more hoops, and it stops them from being able to do their jobs properly. Admin is a hindrance. So join the union that will actually stand up against bloated government. Join the NPAA, the Nurses Professional Association, will make hospitals locally autonomous and run by elected boards. To find out more, just Google NPAA. The NPAA's fees are half the price because none of your money goes to any political party. And as an Other Side viewer, if you use our special code OTHERSIDE1 when you sign up, you will get the first 3 months free or $100 off your annual payment. Go to npaaredunion.com and sign up now for a better union, and support the Other Side too by supporting our sponsors. Thank you, nurses, you legends. So tell us about your situation now. You are trying to come to Australia to do a tour, and we'd certainly like to have you here. You've said a lot of great things in the past, but people are concerned about some things you've said recently, which they're claiming are very anti-Semitic. I've heard a lot of media talking about this in Australia in the last week or so. I know you did an interview with 2GB Radio, the top rating radio station in Sydney. Even the presenter who did that interview was being criticised for interviewing you. I mean, it's really getting quite crazy. My concern is that we're becoming less and less and less tolerant of different voices in Australia. And this idea that we can just keep people out who say things that we disagree with, especially when they're non-violent, reasonable, sensible people, as you are, it does concern me. Why are you in trouble, Candace? What have you said?
I'm not entirely sure. I never really am. These firestorms come every so often. Obviously, the first one was when I stood up to the George Floyd narrative, when the media was trying to turn him into Jesus Christ, and they lied about the facts surrounding the case. They only showed one video, and they conveniently forgot to mention that this guy was on drugs. And I did this video, and it got 100 million views, and I went through a severe firestorm. And I think part of that is because the media gets very angry when you disrupt their narrative. And you can think that the media just became this way, just became authoritarian, and that's not accurate. This is just the first time that we're starting to see it and recognize it. It's been going on like this for a very long time, but now with podcasting and independent voices, it's very frustrating for them that when they do these sorts of things and they issue these hit campaigns, that a person can survive, and so they've done this to me in the past, and it's typically always the same thing. I take a perspective on an agreed upon narrative by the mainstream media that is not approved, that's not pre-approved. And so whether it's BLM and George Floyd, also when I took a different perspective on Me Too, I was instantly vocally against it, obviously understanding that you can't just make men face consequences because a girl made an allegation. I mean, that's crazy. They went around the world and said that I was defending rapists, and that I was a internalized misogynist. And so this time, the hot button issue, obviously going on in the country, is Israel and Palestine, because America gives a ton of money to Israel every year, and we have for a very long time. I mean, we give way too much money. And if you're a person like me who doesn't believe that we should be sending a single dollar overseas while our nation is suffering, while our own citizens are suffering and can't afford to buy groceries or pay for gas. You guys might call it petrol in Australia. But I've landed on the wrong side of that issue. I've critiqued, God forbid, you critique Bibi Netanyahu and his actions. You will just meet the full swing of the mainstream media. And I have stood up to these lobbying groups. And like you saw, the Zionist Federation of America, who are effectively just trying to bully people into their perspectives. And their perspective is that you can't critique anything Bibi does. And as a Christian, I am not comfortable with the amount of child death that is happening in Palestine right now. I'm not comfortable with the things that the politicians are saying. They have no desire or plan to stop. And I do not think it's acceptable to believe that you have a right to kill every single woman and child as a response. And so that is kind of what got me on the list to begin with. And I've kind of just been fielding attacks all year, really. I mean, really since November of last year. So it really did begin with October 7th and me just having a different opinion about what was happening.
We've been very pro-Israel on this show and very, we're completely independent, but we took a view early on that what happened on October 7 was hideous. We had a lot of people, and we've had a lot of people on this show talking about it and the response and the difficulty of doing a measured response. I mean, you're sending your young men into another territory at risk. They got to fight a war, sadly, and that means they got to kill people. That's an enormous pressure you're putting on them, and you can't sort of hamstring them. By the same token, I guess many other people have been quite shocked by the extent of this. And there is this question of proportionality under international law. As skeptical as I am at times of international law, but there are these guidelines for war, and it isn't. You can't. It's as bad as the slur Islamophobic, right? You can't say you're anti-Semitic every time you criticize Israel. It's like you've got to be able to. And many Jewish people and many Israelis are concerned about the extent of this war and the way that it's being prosecuted.
The number one people who protest Bibi Netanyahu are Israelis. That's what's so fascinating, is that when you read Haaretz or you read the Jerusalem Post, when you read any of these publications, they are outwardly in the streets protesting him and saying, this is not good. Like, what you are doing is not good for us. You are doing this for yourself, and it's selfish. And yet in America, there is such a strong lobby. AIPAC, they just crossed spending $100 million on our elections. And essentially, it is just an understanding in America that if you question anything about Israel, the media publications will come for your entire life. And so, I mean, openly, by the way, it's not like I'm imagining it. Like, you have rabbis that will say, we are coming for you. Like, you come for Israel, we're going to come for you. And there's no consequence for that. So it's quite shocking to see it when you're going, everything I'm saying is very humane. And it is a BLM tactic. Anybody who said anything about BLM Incorporated, what do they get called? A racist, a white supremacist. You hate Black people. It's like, no, I hate this movement, and I hate what this movement is going to eventually spell out for inner city communities where Black people live, which is destruction and desolation. But people don't want to hear that when they're in, their emotion and feeling that, they can shield themselves by just calling everything and anyone that disagrees with them racist, or in this circumstance, anti-Semitic.
Yeah. And your campaign, the Blexit campaign, which was your campaign that you set up around about, I think, 2018, that was to basically get African Americans to reconsider their undying allegiance to the Democrats. There's a bit of a distortion of history there too, right? Because it wasn't the Democrats that made the first gains for African American equality in the US. There was a lot coming from the conservative side as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, they've lied to us about our history, and I think now we understand it because, like I said, because there's so much independent media, we see that they lie to us about the present now, which is crazy. Like they're lying to us about what happened yesterday. So of course now we realize how being able to control textbooks has really just become an instrument for them to lie to us about everything that's taken place. And unfortunately, the public school system in America is a disaster. This is essentially just Stalin youth. These are programs that are designed to transform children into Marxists and to constantly race bait, to make Black people graduate and fear white people, to make everybody hate one another, to make gay people hate straight people, to make women hate men. We've got this whole feminist agenda going on. And I have stood up to all of that because I've recognized my own conditioning coming out of a public school and having believed all of those ideologies once upon a time in my life. And again, when you start speaking against those things and waking people up to these sorts of manipulation, you do become public enemy number one because people achieve power with these cheap shots. It is powerful to call someone a homophobe, right? You're a transphobe. I mean, even the Zionist Federation, what they published in Australia was just filled with lies and intentionally removed from its context. Like one example, they wrote that I said something about trans people and that trans people are to blame for the rise in school shootings. That is inaccurate. Actually, what I said is a fact. It just is the circumstance that the last dozen or so school shootings have been executed by people that are non-binary or trans. And I've asked the question, why do we never have a discussion about what's in their medicine cabinets? I'm constantly pushing at Big Pharma, who I believe a lot of the evil stuff that is happening in our society, the crimes, the shootings, are due to pharmaceuticals, like people that are on medicine that is psychologically warping them. And so to see them take these things out of context and make it seem like I'm accusing all trans people of being shooters, and they even brought up the New Zealand shooter manifesto. I mean, it's such a cheap, desperate ploy to make people who are emotional and not rational hate somebody on the basis of sheer emotion.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, even though you do have strong views, you have views I don't agree with, you have some, this is the other thing that bugs me, right? There doesn't seem to be an awareness. I get people responding to this show saying, I'm never watching again because you said one thing that I don't like, and then I get wonderful people writing, I don't agree with everything you say, but I'm going to keep watching your show because I think we need a different voice, and being very supportive. And that's the mentality we've got to mature into as a population, as people. If we're going to maintain our freedom and our true diversity of thought, we've got to evolve into people who can tolerate and measure different opinions and different views. There might be a kernel of truth in something you say I don't agree with, and then from that view you had that I didn't agree with, I shift my view a little bit, and vice versa. Or people, the conversation has to continue if we're going to be free. And what I'm really disturbed about as an Australian right now is that we used to be a free country. And I had a friend send me a text message this morning. He's in Spain on holiday, and he said he ran into an American, and he was at a wine tour, and she asked him, "Oh, is Australia still a democracy?" And it's just like, that's where we're heading. It's like people, the perception, no, we're not as bad as Canada, should be the reply, but it's, we are just Canada with sun, But Candace, what is happening? I mean, you're not seeing that in America, right? Just yet. It's not quite that bad. No. You're not getting this Commonwealth UK. I mean, your husband's British, but you're not. You know what's going on over there. Yeah, I mean, tell me it's not as bad in America just yet.
It's not as bad as in America just yet. And that is why I was so truly shocked by the calls to cancel my visa. And that girl who said that on holiday, that American girl, that really does speak to the heart of the American reaction when you hear something like that, because we still, left and right, I mean, we are at each other's throats every single day, saying and doing horrific things on the internet. We believe in free speech. And for a politician to make a statement saying that they're just, whatever it was, maybe Tony Burke's quote got butchered in the media, I've been lied about, so I don't want to say he definitively said it this way, but for him to say that he was going to personally look through the visa and put a stop to it on the basis of something that I never said, No politician would proudly say that in America. That would be instantly, people would go, you're an authoritarian. And so when we hear that, we do wonder, like, is that a free country? Like, because I could go to the Middle East and not say that. I could go to Dubai and not hear that, that we're going to review this on the basis of something that she said. And so you go, how could this happen in Australia? Like, I've never been there, but I always assumed the Aussies were like the Americans, like, like that's our brethren. And surely they're going to be equally as mortified that they would have a politician say that. And so we just wonder what's going on, especially after we were following all of the stories of what happened in Australia during COVID. We were just wondering, like, has Australia been taken over by communism? Like, do we need to go rescue Australians? I said that once tongue in cheek.
Yeah, I remember that. I think, and Matt Walsh made some
very seriously, like, Candace is calling for us to invade Australia. But I was making the obvious statement that, like, if we're going to talk about spreading democracy, maybe we should go help our friends over in Australia first. Because I don't think they've got it.
Hopefully we'll work it out. Matt Walsh was very funny on that too, I thought. He similarly said we possibly should invade Australia and help them out down there because they've lost the perception, the old perception in America of Australians was that, we're tough and strong and Crocodile Dundee. And now we've become this kind of nation that wants to shut everything down, protect everything, keep everybody safe. We need big daddy and mummy government to look after us. And so, our Minister for Immigration does have authority under the Act to step in if they believe there's a character issue with somebody. Note it says character issue and not, I politically disagree with this person, therefore I'm going to keep them out of the country, which I just find a complete offense.
Which is a nonsense. I mean, the only way you'd be able to do something like that in America, to be able to speak outward and say, like, I'm going to review this visa, would be if somebody had quite literally committed a crime. Like if you said a drug trafficker was coming in, a pedophile was coming in, then Americans would be like, yes, we do not want this person in our country. But for a mom of three who has a podcast, like a Christian mom of three with a podcast, like, we would be like, what on earth? Like, what are our tax dollars doing? Yeah.
Oh, well, exactly. And that's what we should be thinking.
There's a lot going on in the world. We don't need you picking on, like, moms with the toddlers. But that really does show you that these people, and I'm referring to the organizations that lobbied for him to even have to respond to this, they don't fear me. They don't fear me. They know that I'm not a risk. They know I've never even had to consider traveling around. It's such a nonsense. But what they do fear is open dialogue. They must think that something that I'm saying is convincing enough that if people hear it, they might respond to it. And what am I actually speaking about? I'm talking about the importance of freedom. I'm talking about the importance of the nuclear family. I am talking about the importance for people to wake up and realize that the state is encroaching into every area of our lives. I believe in national sovereignty. I believe in personal liberty. I believe in family, and I believe in God. And that is a problem. That is, in fact, a problem for a state that wants to be the end all be all of everything in your lives.
Well, way to prove your point, right? I mean, that's exactly what they're doing by doing this. I mean, that is a proof point for everything you're saying. And the really frightening thing for us in Australia, and it's not so much, you have your rhinos over there. We have a Liberal Party opposition here, and we use the word liberal here to mean conservative, but that's all very down under and confusing and upside down, I know, but just excuse that for a minute. But our Liberal Party, which is our Conservative Party, they've come out and said also that they think you should be banned, which is just ridiculous. I mean, it's just got to the point of absolute ridiculousness, which makes me think, okay, this must be a PR coordinated campaign, right? And there are left-wing, particularly left-wing Jewish groups, because the conservative Jewish group in Australia, who we are friendly with on this show and we've had on a lot of times, the Australian Jewish Association, they've not called for you to be banned. They've been concerned about some of the things you've said, but they have said, no, we don't believe in people being banned. So, we're even getting that from the conservative side of the Jewish organizations, which is good.
They should speak out, because one of the things that really happens, if you want to talk about true anti-Semitism and how it grows, it's when people see these sorts of moves, and you have a group of people who are like, we are the Zionist Federation of Australia, and we are going to stop this girl from coming in. What is that? What message does that send to the world? Right. And if that actually goes through, right, that's not it's going to create the opposite desired effect. There was no risk of anti-Semitism when I came into your country. There was a risk of debate. If somebody asked me a question, I mean, I don't even speak about Israel and Palestine on stage, but if somebody came up and asked me a question, I would answer it and give them my viewpoint. I just tell my story and speak about why I believe family and in faith, But if they did actually ban me, what do you think that looks like to the world? I mean, we call that winning to lose, right? You win in the short term, but the response, because the people are going to see that, is not going to be the response that you anticipated. And so I do feel that you have these Jewish groups like the one that you're describing who don't agree with this, and yet they get dragged into this same shoddy stereotypes because of what other groups are doing, by flexing their muscle in this way that's completely unnecessary.
Yeah, and it feeds. I mean, what message does that send to the true, far right neo-Nazi creep who's sitting there in his basement, hearing that, and then that feeds this conspiracy about the Jewish cabal around the world. It's terrible, and a stupid own goal. It's a stupid mistake that they're making to be going after you in that way. All right, so you said some stuff that really upset them that was kind of a bit over the edge. Do you regret anything you've said? Do you want to wind anything back? Do you want to clarify anything? I mean, I've seen clips that are, I think, taken out of context. I haven't found the context, unfortunately. I haven't had time to look back at it. But
no worries.
I can provide it. And I don't want to give it airtime. Yeah, I don't want to give it airtime by replaying it all. But I think the thing that got people was you were talking about the Frankists. And to be clear, the Frankists were not Jewish or connected to Judaism in any way. The Frankists was a splinter group, but it got quite big in Poland and Lithuania, I think, there for a little while, with probably, I think 5-figure number members, and it was kind of a bit of an issue. And these people, this was kind of like, I guess, the precursor to Freudian psychoanalysts, or I don't know, this kind of mindset, almost satanic, or it sounds conspiratorial. It sounds like a conspiracy theory. It is really, really weird, but it was real. And you can read about it on Wikipedia. This movement was really sick, and these people believed that they had to do everything against whatever the Torah said and go against things in the extremes. So there was revolting stuff in there that I don't even want to discuss about what they got up to. You talked about that, and people were saying, oh, you're being anti-Semitic because you're talking about these Frankists, this weird thing, right? Was that the confusion?
That was, and it wasn't. It was an intentional confusion because they knew what I was speaking about. Like, Jewish organizations have covered the Frankist movement extensively, and I had read about it because I read an Israeli historian called Gershom Scholem, who is sort of considered the official historian on Frankism and its precursor, which was called Sebastianism. And I was fascinated by this period in history because I was looking into Sigmund Freud and just some weird theories he had, and learned and stumbled upon this reading a book by another Jewish author named David Bakken. And so it was really strange that they then completely lied and pretended that I was talking about Judaism, when in the reality, the first people that kicked out the Frankists in society were the Jews. The Jews quite literally kicked them out of their society when they found out what they were up to, which were these bizarre sex rituals and some stuff that literally, as sacraments, they were committing crimes against children. This is all historical fact, and that no one disputes that fact. They just wanted Jews to think that I was speaking about them, when in reality, I was defending Jews by saying, like, you have people who do horrific things and then say, oh, no, I'm a Jew. You can't believe anything that you're reading about me. This is all anti-Semitism. And this is kind of what Frankists started doing until the true Jews were like, get the heck out of here, you're disgusting. And so it was very dishonest. And, this hit without question came from the Anti-Defamation League of America, because I stood up to them trying to whitewash the history of a convicted pedophile in America named Leo Frank. And that, trying to whitewash this powerful man's history is how the ADL was born. And so I think they were very angry at the fact that I told people about the Leo Frank case, the reality of it, not the new modern spin on it, that the ADL is spending tons of money trying to pretend that he could have been innocent and a black janitor did it, which is unbelievably racist. And that made them send out an email to reporters all around the world, telling them to attack me for anti-Semitism and lying and saying that I said Judaism is a pedophilic centric religion, which, like, as a Christian, that is so offensive to me, because what is my Bible? What are the first 5 books of my Bible? I mean, and I just like, come, of course. Like, how could I, if I said that Judaism was pedophilic centric, I would then have to say Christianity was pedophilic centric, you know? But this is how lies make their way around the world, and people don't look for the original content. They see things that are taken out of context, and they hear me saying, and in that same video, I said, case in point of people that are using and saying you can't question something. Right now, Israel has become a safe haven to pedophiles. Like, American pedophiles are able to run away and get citizenship in Israel. And we know this thanks to an incredible Jewish organization in America who did this work and due diligence and got the media to publish. And they went over to Tel Aviv, found these pedophiles, and were like, why is Israel allowing these people to hide? Like, make them extradite. These people have raped children. And that's unacceptable. We give them way too much money for us not to be able to extradite our pedophiles. And that's a very sensible, understandable position for me to have as a mother. Like, the concern of pedophilia, people that get away with pedophilia, like, obviously as a mother to 3 young toddlers, is a major concern of mine. And so I'm so disturbed that rather than reporting on that and saying, yeah, you know what, that's a really good position to have. It's a very easy thing for us to lobby for. Like, Israel, give America back their pedophiles so that they can prosecute them and let these children get closure. And thank you to this amazing Jewish organization that brought that to the forefront of the public. They go, let's take down Candace Owens and pretend she's saying all Jewish people are pedophiles.
Yeah, I don't get what. Yeah, that's right. It's just ridiculous, and I don't quite understand why they would want to do that. I get that there's this concern that there might be a muddying or a confusion, that they're worried about. Oh, it sounds like fodder for feeding the neo-Nazi anti-Semitism or something, if you give lip service to these things. But if there are really bad things going on, and Australia we have one good thing about our country is we've got extraterritorial laws. So if an Australian citizen goes to the Philippines or Thailand and is involved in any form of sexual activity with minors, they can be hauled back here and jailed for 30 years, right? So, that's what we're asking for. That's important stuff. It's not just Israel. It has stuff. Yeah, I guess the point I'm making is not just Israel has that problem, right? There are a lot of countries around the world that have got this problem. And these people do go and hide out in these less open countries, I guess. Yeah, Candace, you've been extremely generous with your time. I hope the tour goes ahead. I see no reason why it shouldn't, and we'll certainly keep an eye on things, and we should be quite angry if it doesn't go ahead. So hopefully the government will come to its senses. Hopefully our opposition will grow a spine. That would be good. And we will see what happens. But do you want to just finish up by telling us what you'll be talking about on the tour? And
yeah, I mean, I just share with people my story and just share with them, what brought me to this moment, and also really try to impress upon them how significant this time is in America and Australia, all around the world. If we do not stand up and be brave, and recognize what is happening, it is going to be our children that are going to suffer when the West falls. And I am fearful that the West, the concept of Western democracy, whether real or imagined, is narrowly slipping away. And it's going to take people being brave, like actually speaking out and saying when something is wrong and not worrying about smears. And people say, I allowed this to happen to my child because I just didn't want to be called like an anti-vaxxer, during COVID, or I allowed this to happen. I knew it was wrong. We can't do that. We have a very small window of opportunity to change this thing around. And I think that opportunity is right before us. And what I also want to say is that if you've listened to my content out of context, it probably sounds wacky. Allow me to put it in its proper context. I would love for you to come. If you're somebody who thinks you disagree with me, I especially want you to come on tour. Like, I speak all around the world, all around the country. And the first thing I always do is I invite people who disagree with me to the front of the line to ask questions. Because as you said, the only way that we grow is if we are willing to engage in dialogue and to reevaluate some things that we maybe got wrong. And I'm not a perfect person. I maybe do get some things wrong, but I am humble enough to admit when I make those mistakes, and I'm always willing to learn.
Well, Candace, it's been great talking to you. And if our government doesn't allow you physically into the country, you're welcome on this show anytime.
Well, you're so kind. Thank you so much for having me, and I can't wait to get out there.
There was a landmark ruling in the Federal Court of Australia last week in which Justice Robert Bromwich determined that sex is changeable and non-binary. It's a huge ruling and precedent in Australian law. Justice Bromwich was deciding whether the Sex Discrimination Act could be used against a company called Giggle for Girls that had an app that was for women only and were blocking trans women, men who believe they are women, from using it. A trans woman by the name of Roxy Tickle had made a complaint to the Australian Sex Discrimination Commissioner in the Australian Human Rights Commission. We have so many lovely excessive bureaucrats protecting our rights, don't we? Roxy complained after being banned from the Giggle app. Giggle had to go to conciliation, but they stood their ground, so it went to court. And now we have a precedent that will forever be known and taught in law schools as Giggle versus Tickle. The laws of our land are not made in the courts totally. They are interpreted in the courts and ruled on whether they are constitutional or not in the courts. But the laws are made by politicians in our parliaments, our representatives of us, the people. So Justice Bromwich was just interpreting the Sex Discrimination Act, which was changed in 2013 by the Gillard government to add in that gender was non-binary. Tony Abbott became Prime Minister later that year and reversed that change. Oh, no. Wait, sorry, no, he didn't reverse that change. Gee, wow, okay. Neither did Turnbull or ScoMo. Okay, oh well. Anyway, that's it, ladies. No private spaces for you. No app for women only. Will Peter Dutton declare that he will change the act now? Given the amount of opposition in the community to the idea that men can be women, you'd think the opposition would be an opposition on this one. Or are we really a uni-party nation? We spoke to the founder of Giggle for Girls, Sal Grover, at length late last year on The Other Side, and we've reposted that interview on our channel this week. You'll find it in the segments playlist. We have 2 playlists on our channel, full weekly shows and segments, so you can watch the way that you want to watch. So do check that out. Sal tells the whole story from beginning to end. The message for young budding entrepreneurs in Australia: don't bother. Big Brother and bureaucrats will drive you nuts if you try to start a business in this country. In other news this week, the Northern Territory has a new Chief Minister after the Labor Party got absolutely smacked down in the election last weekend. They lost 9 of their 14 seats in the 25-seat parliament, so they're now down to just 5 seats. The Country Liberal Party held on to all 7 seats that it had before the election, then more than doubled that to reach a majority of 16 at least. It could end up being as high as 18. It'll probably end up being about 17 out of 25 though. So that's a resounding win in anyone's language. And it sends a big signal to both the major parties, because the candidate and now the Chief Minister of the Northern Territory, the Country Liberal Party leader, Leah Finocchiaro, was strong and loud and tough on crime. She ran the opposite of the small target election approach that the Liberals have run everywhere else in Australia, which has put them in opposition in every mainland state and federally. Next up, election-wise, is Queensland, where the Liberal National Party opposition leader, David Crisafulli, has been adopting not just a small target strategy lately, but a complete invisibility strategy, it seems. Bring on the uni party. Meanwhile, the Premier of Queensland, Stephen Miles, continues to willingly and effectively distance himself from Anastasia Palaszczuk, the previous unpopular Premier. They did a lovely little double act of public separation this week that looked a little bit planned to me, possibly. Palaszczuk did a rare public appearance in Brisbane, which Miles did not attend, and Palaszczuk refused to endorse Miles when she was asked to by the media or make any comment. Miles, meanwhile, was 1,600 kilometres away in Cairns at another event. Could you get any further? Not a bad bit of political theatre if you're trying to say, we are not the same to the electorate. Miles is also building his profile quite well among young voters on social media. So it could be time for Mr. Crisafulli to discard the small target strategy, or he could end up losing the unlosable election. Differentiation is the key to marketing a new product, kiddies. Give us a uni party and we'll just stick with the guy we've got. No need to risk any change. Folks, I'm genuinely really worried about our country, as you may have noticed. I know that the left dominate our schools and universities and media and the public service bureaucracy. I know that the public service is huge and getting huger and more costly by the second. I know that we are insanely in debt and that we're printing money and that we're causing inflation. And I know that people keep voting for the Greens because they think they're nice, and for Labor because they think they're the working person's party and stand up for the little guy. That's all bad enough. But we at least used to have a counterbalance to all that. We used to have a business class who understood that life isn't as sweet and nice as the people on the left like to imagine it is, and who would bring a dose of grown-up reality to the table every now and again. Now, capital, unfortunately, has gone woke too. Corporations and the big superannuation funds who hold half the money that this country has for private investments are now woke as well, or at least pretending to be. And the Liberal and National parties are woke in fear of being caught out for not being woke enough. We are in deep trouble. Education is woke, journalism is woke, and this week it really showed just how dangerous the left really was fully on display. First, we had our treasurer, Jim Chalmers, giving a speech where he said that Peter Dutton was the most divisive leader of a major political party in Australia's modern history. And not by accident, but by choice, he said. And 10 News reported on that.
The Treasurer says it is dangerous and his divisiveness should be disqualifying. Jim Chalmers used those words in a speech, then doubled down on radio this morning.
I think some of these things about Peter Dutton's strategy need to be pointed out. You know, he is the most divisive political leader that I've seen in my lifetime. And this is a deliberate choice by him. It's not some accident. He divides deliberately, almost pathologically.
Right. So the political party that gives us identity politics, literally the ideology that seeks to divide people on ridiculous, immutable characteristics like race, gender, and sexuality, the party that brought us the voice referendum, that party is lecturing the right side of politics about divisiveness. Seriously? The party that wanted to enshrine division of Australia by race into our constitution is telling Peter Dutton that he is divisive. Their definition of divisive is simply anything that doesn't agree with what they think. 10 News reported that Dutton had this to say in response.
But he wants to talk about everything but his failure in the economy. Now, if Australians were doing it so well and the economy was running, as great as Jim Chalmers claims it is, why is he dedicating a speech to me?
Good question. Jim Chalmers, our Treasurer and Albo's right-hand man, is a doctor, not of medicine. He has a doctorate of philosophy, a PhD in political science. Politics is not a science, of course, but never mind that, that's our Aussie universities. And Dr. Chalmers' whole life has been in politics. He wrote a long essay that was published in The Monthly magazine last year in which he laid out his plan to fix capitalism. Okay, well, he's humble, that's for sure. No delusions of grandeur there. Guess how he wants to fix capitalism? I read the whole article. It was a great insomnia cure. He wants to fix capitalism the same way that all lefties have wanted to fix capitalism since the 19th century, with more active involvement by the government to favour businesses that will do what the government wants them to do, to suit the government's social and environmental priorities. Dr. Jim calls it values-based capitalism. Sounds so noble. I call it what it is, socialism. And another bloke already had this idea, Jimbo. His name was Karl Marx. It got tried in the 20th century. Yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work in a spectacular, mass murderous fashion. What works is free markets and liberty, and governments butting out as much as is possible. Not so much fun for the control left, because then they don't get to control everything and boss us all around. Now, poor old Jim is freaking out because reality, that is free markets doing what free markets will do, no matter what governments try to do to stop them, is doing what reality does. When you print and spend money you don't actually have, you get inflation. You can't just print more money without it devaluing the money that's already out there and sending prices up. Someone needs to explain this to the Liberal Party too, by the way. So now we have high inflation. Of course, you knew that already, but new inflation data out on Wednesday confirmed that inflation in the year to July was higher than market expectations. It was 3.5%. That's higher than the Reserve Bank's target range of 2 to 3%, which means they won't be bringing interest rates down anytime soon. Surprise! And this is despite the happy handouts of the money that the Labor governments have been giving away all over the country to try to hide that reality of inflation, all the energy rebates and stuff. The Reserve Bank almost put up interest rates again in August, and they probably will do it at least one more time before the year's out, I reckon. So you can expect that the base rate that the Reserve charges banks to borrow money from it goes from the 4.35% it is now to 4.6% before anything starts to come down again. Factoring where electricity prices would have gone if the government wasn't handing out freebies, and the situation's probably much worse. Many economists are now saying that we won't see an interest rate cut in the first quarter of next year. Some say there might be one in February, but these are the same people who said there'd be 3 to 4 cuts this year. So I'm not buying it. Opposition Treasury spokesman Angus Taylor also reckons there's no relief in sight, noting that since the 2022 election, the price of everything is up 10%. He's been reported as saying that gas is up 33%, rent is up 16%, and electricity 14%, even with all the rebates. So now all Jim and Albo can do is throw personal barbs at Peter Dutton. They're doing what every lefty does online when they can't win an argument. They go for personal attacks, ad hominem. In fact, they usually start with the personal attacks, actually, because to them the world is just divided into the cool kids and the uncool kids, because that reflects their capacity for intellectual thought. Many of them are still mentally stuck at uni or high school, where their crazy ideas were propped up by equally wacky academics, shielded from the real world. Horrifying thing number 2 that happened this week that really depressed me about the state of our nation's governance was the pure insanity of Tanya Plibersek, Albo's intrepid environment minister. In case you missed it, she blocked at the very last minute, after 4 years of planning and getting approvals from the government, at the last minute, she blocks a $1 billion coal mine that would have brought $200 million in royalties a year into New South Wales, plus hundreds of millions more in rates and taxes as well, and it would have created 800 jobs. And all that economic flow-on benefit that would have come for that as well. That move was so stupid that even her fellow New South Wales Labor colleague, the Premier, Chris Minns, condemned it, as Sky News reported this week.
I've said, Mr Chair, I'm disappointed by the decision from the Commonwealth Government. The application was made in 2019. It's gone through the Independent Planning and Assessment Commission, as well as every other government department in New South Wales. And to be knocked over at the 11th hour is disappointing in terms of mining gold and other critical minerals in New South Wales, which we desperately need because coal mining is under pressure, particularly when it comes to export market.
Thank God somebody gets it. New South Wales Labor Premier Chris Minns chastising his own party's federal government for this crazy move. Plibersek's 11th hour pulling of the pin on the permissions for the mine to build a tailings dam in a particular area was because of Aboriginal cultural issues, apparently, although it turned out to be nonsense in itself, with a major Aboriginal body saying there were no issues. Whoops. Reality is that she was trying to sweeten up the Greens and Green voters because Labor desperately needs the Greens' preferences in inner city seats like hers. This move caused the mining company to pull the pin on the whole project, saying it's not worth it and it'll take 5 to 10 years to get it back on track with a new location for the tailings dam. Whoops again. Now, Chris Minns is scrambling to get the project back on track, realising the massive cost this is going to have to his state. It's a bloody clown show. And worse than anything is what is called sovereign risk. Sovereign risk is what they call it when you send a very bad message to the whole world about your country being not such a safe, reliable, sensible place for investment. Drop out of a Commonwealth Games that you'd promised to host? Sovereign risk. Shut down a mine project at the 11th hour after it's gone through all the approvals process and been given the nod? Sovereign risk. Investors around the world have options, you know, and they talk to each other, especially about governments doing last-minute backflip things that can make investments and planning that takes years disappear in seconds. The market for capital is competitive. And I don't know, but we Aussies seem to be living in a fantasy land sometimes. We think the world is going to put up with all our dumb local political games and garbage. They're not. The money is going to go elsewhere, and so are the jobs. But if you thought all that was bad, the award for the dumbest and scariest left-wing nonsense of the entire week has to go to none other than the king of far-left Looneyland, Greens leader Adam Bandt. These guys don't have a university-level view of economics and the world. They have a primary school-level view. Just tax all the rich bastards and the evil corporations. In a National Press Club lovey lunch in Canberra, the capital city of out-of-touch Australian federal bureaucrats, intellectual giant of populist trash socialism in our nation, Adam Bandt, had this great wisdom to impart.
Since the pandemic, big corporations and billionaires have been making bigger profits, increasing at a faster rate than at any time in history. While people went backwards, the biggest 500 corporations made $98 billion in crisis profits off the back of the pandemic.
Oh no, all that success and profit, how awful. Whatever will we do about all that wealth creation? That's terrible for Australia. Honestly, the Greens really are at kindergarten level thinking. Do they realise that a lot of these profits get reinvested in the businesses and create more jobs and growth? Do they realise that profits are paid to shareholders, ordinary mum and dad investors who have their super, and that goes back into the economy when they spend it, and they get to decide how to spend it and on what instead of the government? That's the bit that the lefty politicians hate, that you are going to get to decide what to do with your money. They really hate that. And do they realise also that these profits are actually taxed and that already goes to the government? I mean, just how big do these clowns want our government to be? And then he goes on with the usual garbage about how it's evil big corporations causing inflation.
Coles and Woolworths have both increased their profits too, as anyone who's been to the supermarket can tell you, pocketing billions off the back of higher prices that just keep going up. Up, up, profits are up.
Oh my God. Inflation is not caused by supermarkets, Adam. It's caused by government. It's caused by government spending money it doesn't have, endlessly making itself richer and richer and bigger and more powerful. And then when it runs out of the money, borrowing more of it and printing more of it. That is what causes inflation. But Adam's answer to inflation is to take even more money from the private economy and from you and the people and give it to the government. He actually, literally, honestly thinks he's Robin Hood now.
This election, the Greens will propose a package of Robin Hood reforms. The aim is simple: to make the big corporations and billionaires pay their fair share of tax to make life better for everyone. Today, I can announce the first of these Robin Hood reforms. We're calling it a big corporations tax, and it has a number of components. The first component is targeted at big corporations who are making excessive profits, beyond a normal return to shareholders. It will apply to companies with an annual turnover of over $100 million, taxing the excess profits that these companies make.
And doing what with that money, Adam? Handing it to government departments and bureaucrats to waste on increasing the size of government and its intrusion into everything? funding more and more of the Greens' pet projects that waste a heck of a lot of money? And what will happen to prices when you add tax to the corporate costs of doing business? Oh yeah, they're just going to be passed on to consumers. And never mind that you'll be driving investment and jobs out of Australia. And the speech just got worse and worse and descended into mad fantasy land. Honestly, it's time for us to completely reject the Greens. I don't know if we need to go offer free economics courses in the streets to the bird brains in the inner cities. Do we need to have little stalls in the middle of Fitzroy and Surrey Hills and West End where you kind of just like go up and they teach you about economics? I mean, it's just nuts. And the Teals are just as bad. Something has got to be done, folks. It's just reaching a point of utter madness. I don't want to see this great country descend into a socialist hell like what happened to Argentina and so many other South American nations. But this week has given me no hope that we won't. You can catch us here on The Other Side every Friday night from 7 p.m. on YouTube. If you'd like to support us, the best way is to support our sponsors. And one of them is Public Internet Access, piavpn.com/otherside to get 83% off your internet security. And you should have internet security right now. Crazy if you don't. Another way is to tell all your friends about the show. We'd really appreciate that. Please help us spread the word. They can catch up on the best news and commentary of the week without the woke in just an hour by watching and listening to The Other Side every weekend. We drop a new show every Friday night at 7 p.m. as you know. And please do subscribe to our channel on YouTube. It is absolutely free. Just hit that subscribe button and the little bell too, and that will notify you whenever we post anything. Also, if you're feeling generous, feel free to drop us a super thanks donation. You can do that by clicking the little $ thanks icon under the video frame on YouTube. And you can also follow us on X, Twitter, at The Other Side on X. It all helps. With all the government crackdown on freedom of speech and digital IDs and marketing companies manipulating your information, you would be crazy not to have a virtual private network on your laptop and phone. In fact, all of your devices. I was once a bit afraid of how these things work, that they might, slow down my internet speed or be too complicated to set up. But private internet access is terrific. And when you buy from them, you're supporting The Other Side too, because they're one of our sponsors. So to help keep yourself safe from big government and big corporations with a VPN, get onto private internet access. We have done a fantastic deal just for Other Side viewers. You're going to get 83% off the usual price and 4 months free. That brings it down to just $2.68 a month, a half a cup of coffee. It's amazing. You just got to use the special access code that you can see on your screen right now. That is piavpn.com, piavpn.com/otherside, and you'll get that discount if you do that, okay? It's super easy to download, super easy to get running. Literally just takes a few minutes, and it's always on. It didn't slow down my internet speed one bit. And a side benefit is that I can now watch Netflix using my Netflix account as if I'm in any country in the world, which opens up the whole global Netflix library to me. And best of all, by using PIA, you're supporting The Other Side in a very big way and helping us to keep on providing an alternative to the mainstream media focused on Aussie news. piavpn.com/otherside. Get on it. And that is all we have time for this week on The Other Side, your weekly summary of the best news and commentary without the woke. Please remember to tell your friends about the show. Also, do